By the way, the President of the United States has authorized the United States Air Force to shoot down Venezuelan fighter jets if they pose a threat to the United States.
F-35 fighter jets are being sent to the Caribbean to combat drug trafficking, according to the Pentagon. At the signing of the order, which changed the name, Trump addressed the Air Force general, saying that the military can shoot down Venezuelan fighter jets if they put United States warships at risk in the Caribbean.
September 2025. The Caribbean Sea is experiencing a tension not seen in decades. American warships patrol Venezuelan waters. Thousands of soldiers have been sent to the region. The official justification: combating drug trafficking. But everyone knows that the real pressure is on him. Nicolas Maduro. In Caracas, the Venezuelan capital, the mood is tense. The Venezuelan regime knows that the Americans are not bluffing. And then, in the midst of this crisis, Venezuela makes a decision that few expected. On September 4th morning, 2 F-16 fighter jets depart a Venezuelan military base. Their destination: the United States ship Jason Dunham, an American destroyer equipped with guided missiles and state-of-the-art defense systems. Could this be a direct provocation? The flyover lasted only a few minutes, but it was enough to cause consequences. These consequences crossed the oceans and reached directly into the Oval Office of the White House. When Donald Trump found out what had happened in the Caribbean, he made a dangerous decision. And Maduro, well, he probably didn't expect that. But to understand why Venezuela took such a risk, we need to go back 2 days in time. We must understand what happened earlier. Something that totally changed the game. The day was Tuesday, September 2nd. A speedboat was cutting through the waters of the Caribbean. On board, 11 people headed to the United States. They were carrying drugs, according to the Americans. But this journey would never reach its end, because the United States military forces were waiting, and when they attacked, it wasn't to scare. 11 people died. None survived. Donald Trump personally announced the attack. He even released a video of the operation. According to him, the vessel was carrying a lot of drugs, and the crew members were part of the Tren de Aragua, a Venezuelan gang that the United States had classified as a terrorist organization at the beginning of 2025. And here's the key to everything. That classification changed everything. Because traditionally, anti-narcotics operations are police operations. You intercept, arrest, seize. But when you label someone a terrorist, the rules change. Now it's war. Now you can kill first and not ask questions later. The Americans didn't call those 11 dead people suspected traffickers. They called them narco-terrorists killed in combat. Do you notice the difference? It's just words, but it changes everything. It allows American military forces to use lethal force in international waters, something that was previously only allowed in cases of direct self-defense. Venezuela quickly responded after learning about this. Diosdado Cabello, one of the most powerful figures in the regime, condemned the attack, labeling the operation as an extrajudicial execution and an illegal massacre. Maduro himself classified the action as an imperialist act and declared that Venezuela was ready for an armed struggle if necessary. But here things get even more interesting. That's because the Venezuelan government also attacked the credibility of the American evidence. They claimed that the video released by Trump was fake, created with artificial intelligence, regardless of who was telling the truth. This created a war of narratives where each side had its own version of the facts. And what do you think? Do you believe the video was really made by artificial intelligence? Leave your opinion down below in the comments. And it was in this explosive atmosphere that Venezuela decided to respond, not with words, but with action. On Thursday, September 4th, 2 veteran pilots from the Venezuelan Air Force got into their F-16s. These planes, by the way, were bought from the Americans themselves back in the 80s. Now they're going to use these machines to challenge the very country that built them. On the other side, the United States ship Jason Dunham, which, by the way, is not just any ship, is an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer equipped with the Aegis system. Imagine a floating fortress capable of detecting and intercepting multiple threats simultaneously: missiles, aircraft, submarines. Its radar can see hundreds of kilometers away, with 96 missile cells ready to fire. Now stop and think for a moment. Against this ship are 2 F-16s from the 1980s with radars that reach only a few dozen kilometers. Weapon systems that are generations behind modern standards. When you realize the disparity, it's normal to ask yourself, but why on earth would Venezuela do this? Why send 2 obsolete planes against one of the most advanced warships in the world? And the answer is simple. What they did wasn't about winning a battle. It was about sending a message. The flyover lasted just a few minutes as the F-16s approached, passed over the American destroyer, and departed. But there's a crucial technical detail that shows what really happened there. At no point did the Venezuelan pilots paint the American ship with fire control radar. This is important because painting with fire control radar is universally considered an immediate hostile act. It's like pointing a loaded gun. If they had done that, the United States ship Jason Dunham would probably have reacted immediately. In other words, as provocative as it was, Venezuela was careful not to cross certain red lines. It was a calculated provocation. Risky, but calculated. The American reaction was immediate. The Pentagon condemned the flyover as a highly provocative move, intended to interfere with anti-narcoterrorism operations. But the most interesting thing was the language they used. They called the Venezuelan government a cartel that controls Venezuela. That's right, they called it a cartel, not a government. This legitimizes the militarized stance of the Americans, treating Maduro not as the president of a country, but as the leader of a criminal organization. And then we get to the most surprising moment of this story: Trump's reaction.
The military can shoot down Venezuelan fighter jets if they put United States warships at risk in the Caribbean.
Friday, September 5th, White House. Trump is questioned by journalists about the flyover. His answer was direct and unprecedented. If they put us in a dangerous position, they will be shot down.
I would say they're going to be in trouble. We'll let them know about that. We heard that happen, but it wasn't really over. Not like they described. But I would say, General, if they do that, you have a choice of doing anything you want.
But he didn't stop there. Trump addressed General Dan King, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who was present, and said, "If they put us in a dangerous position, you and your commanders can decide what to do."
Right, sure.
In other words, Trump was delegating authority to shoot down Venezuelan aircraft without needing to consult the American government. This represents an important change in the rules. Before, a decision like that would go up the chain of command. Now, commanders who are there on the ground have full authorization to shoot down Venezuelan aircraft. That statement from Trump served multiple purposes. First, it was meant to intimidate, warning Maduro that the limit for provocations had ended. Second, it reinforced his immunity, his image as a decisive leader for the American public. And third, it placed all the responsibility for avoiding escalation on Maduro's shoulders. And do you know what Maduro's reaction was? Well, he remained silent. The government also did not issue any official statement explaining what happened, nor did it take responsibility. This silence seems to have made things even more confusing. After all, this stance ends up helping Venezuela avoid giving the United States more reasons to retaliate. However, if Maduro thought things would end like this, he was mistaken. Because the American response was coming. And well, my friends, it was colossal. In the hours following Trump's statement, 10 F-30 fighter jets and 5 Lightning II were sent to an air base in Puerto Rico. Did you hear that right? 10 F-35 as the most advanced fighter jets in the world, stealthy, invisible to radar, against the F-16's Venezuelans, who, let's be honest, don't stand a chance. The message was crystal clear. It's like he was saying, you provoked us with old jets. Here's our answer. This was an overwhelming demonstration of American technological dominance. After all, the F-35S can detect, track, and eliminate the Venezuelan F-16s before the Venezuelan pilots even know they're under attack. It's like bringing a knife to a machine gun fight. But the consequences of this action didn't stop there. Venezuela then mobilized its military forces and civilian militias. Maduro declared readiness for combat as neighboring countries reassessed their security. The entire Caribbean went on alert. The president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, traditionally an ally of the United States in the region, openly criticized the American operation. If the attack on the vessel is confirmed, he called it murder and warned that an invasion of Venezuela would drag Colombia into the conflict. Lula's Brazil remained neutral, declaring that it would side with peace. Russia and China took the opportunity to criticize American interventionism and make their geopolitical points. But perhaps the most lasting consequence of all this is the legal precedent that was established. By labeling a drug gang as a terrorist organization, the United States created a justification to use lethal military force against criminal groups in international waters. This fundamentally changes the rules of the game in the fight against drug trafficking. These operations used to be law enforcement actions, sometimes with military support, but now they can be combat operations. The difference is that now you no longer need to make arrests and ask questions later. Now they can simply eliminate the threat. In the end, Maduro managed to mobilize internal support by showing that he was standing up to the American empire. Trump, in turn, managed to demonstrate military strength and establish new, more aggressive rules. In a way, both sides gained politically. Meanwhile, the Caribbean, a region that was relatively stable, now lives under military tension. And this escalation showed how situations can quickly get out of control. And what do you think? Do you think Venezuela acted correctly, or was it irresponsible to carry out this flyover? Leave your opinion in the comments. If you enjoyed this analysis, subscribe to the channel and share it with anyone else who's interested in these topics. See you next time.